Ellison. I'm currently chair of the Friends of Poynton Pool group. I was sort of coerced into it, but it's been something of a journey over the past few months. There are just a few introductions to make before we start. Then we'll go through the proposal and the planning application. We've worked up some options. So we have an engineer. Stuart is an engineer who works on reservoirs, and John Borthwick is a civils designer, and John and Stuart have put together a couple of alternative proposals to be able to demonstrate that the proposal that's in at the moment for planning isn't an absolute requirement, that there are better options. And then we'll talk very briefly about the way forward and the different outcomes that might arise from the Strategic Planning Board meeting next week. We'll finish off with some questions and answers. So if you've got any questions, if you can save those till the end, that would be good. But if you feel the absolute need to jump in at any stage, then please do. So I'm an arboriculturist, a tree consultant. I got involved because I saw that there was a major issue in terms of the loss of trees, and I wanted to offer my support. And Stuart over here is an engineer, fellow of the Institute of Chartered Engineers, and has actually, until it was disbanded, sat on their panel of water engineers. Then we have John Borthwick, structural and civils designer. So John has been helping us produce drawings and designs. Then Gwenda, who introduced me. Gwenda is vice chair. Jen over here is one of the people who helped to set up the Friends of Poynton Pool initially. And then Elaine over here has been with us for not that long, actually, probably about 6 months. Elaine works like a Trojan. You've been such an asset to the group. But that's not all. We've had some really invaluable support from Poynton Town Council, from the clerk of the council, from the councillors themselves. One or two councillors are here tonight. So Mike Stewart's over here, Mike Beanland over at the back. So thanks, guys, for your sort of robust support. And then there's one other person in the room, David Lambert, who again has been really supportive. He's read a lot of the documentation that's been put up on the planning portal. He's fed back through Facebook. He's engaged with people. A lot of you guys might be here because of the work that David's done. So, just as a starting point, Friends of Poynton Pool, as sort of representatives of the community, we don't object to improvements being made at Poynton Pool if it can be demonstrated that there's a need. And the problem is that at the moment, no one has actually demonstrated that there is a need. The data that have been used in the Jacobs flood study and in the options report that has been submitted with the planning application are flawed in various ways. And we'll touch upon some of that this evening. Since the Jacobs report was submitted, then even further evidence has come to light that their data are flawed. Those of you who came to the last meeting at the town, the Civic Hall, Town Hall, you will have seen this example, but it's really just to sort of clarify one or two terms. And when we talk about spillway, many people don't really understand what is meant by the term spillway. So there are two spillways at Poynton Pool, or two spillways are proposed at Poynton Pool. One is the permanent spillway, which is that letterbox brick structure that you see when you walk down the western bank of the pool. That's the permanent spillway. And then the proposal is to create an emergency spillway for around about 480 metres of the embankment, so that by creating a level crest to the dam, if it ever overflows, it overflows evenly and doesn't form a gully at any one point along the embankment. So using a bath as an example is quite useful. So if you think about the top of the bath as being the emergency spillway, and then the normal drain, the normal overflow drain, as being the regular spillway, then as long as the normal drain has the capacity of the inflow that comes through the tap, the bath will never overflow. But bring a hose pipe as well and sort of increase the flow capacity, and the overflow can't cope with that, then the bath will spill over. That's the situation that we have at Poynton Pool, is a claim by the council's engineers that in a serious flood event, water levels will rise and overtop the dam. And when they overtop the dam, the water will go to the low spots and erode the embankment to the extent that it will release the entire reservoir down to Cheadle View. The catchment is the area of land that from which the water flows into the pool or into the reservoir. Just a little bit of history. The Poynton Pool is a reservoir. There's no doubt about that. Under the terms of the Reservoir Act, it's greater than 25,000 cubic metres capacity. It's an impounded lake, therefore it's a reservoir. So no one's arguing, or certainly we're not arguing against that. Every 10 years there is an inspection, a Section 10 inspection under the Reservoirs Act. And the last one was in 2016. And that inspection was carried out by an engineer from Lock MacDonald, and he found that the reservoir was deficient, particularly with regard to the freeboard, that there should be a distance from the top of the water, the standing level of the water, to the lowest point on the embankment of 600 millimetres or 60 centimetres. And they found that was deficient by when it was measured and surveyed. It was found to be deficient by, I think, about 270 millimetres. So that's quite significant. That is quite a significant deficiency. And then Jacobs carried out a flood study. So one of the requirements from the Section 10 inspection was that a flood study was carried out. The other requirement was that the council develop an emergency drawdown plan. So in the event that the reservoir springs a leak, they have a plan to get water out of it quickly so it doesn't break the embankment. So Jacobs did that. They produced the flood study, they produced the drawdown plan. The drawdown plan was signed off, the flood study was signed off, and then they went on to produce an options report. So what are the options for resolving the problem? When the planning application went in, they very cleverly failed to submit their options report. So the options report that contained all of the significant detail. And they produced what they referred to as a summary options report. So the summary options report didn't contain all of the critical data that was included in the initial options report. Then in November, the planning application was registered. It was due to go to committee in January. Was it January or February? January, yeah. Due to go to committee in January, but because there were so many objections, then it was deferred until March, and then again until April. So we now have the situation where on the 24th, which is next Wednesday, it goes to the Strategic Planning Board, and it goes with a recommendation to approve. So that recommendation is in what is referred to as the committee report that is produced, written by the planning case officer. So the planning case officer goes out to consultation to various bodies, so the town council, their tree section, their ecology section, their landscape section, their highway section. All of these people, all of these entities have the option to submit a consultation response, as well as other statutory consultees like the Cheshire Wildlife Trust. In the reports that came back from ecology and arboriculture, the tree section, there were a lot of negative aspects in terms of impact on trees, impact on ecology. And Jacobs then submitted quite substantial documents in an attempt to cover some of those issues that had been raised. So what's the proposal? The proposal is to put in a concrete curb on the west side of a footpath. So they're going to widen the footpath and formalise its surface. They will put in a concrete curb for around about 480 metres of the dam embankment to form a level crest. Then they will create a 2 metre wide grass verge to the west of the concrete curb. So we have a 2 metre path, formalised path, concrete curb, and then a 2 metre wide grass embankment. Also, as part of the proposal, they plan to clear 2 sections that are 40 metres in length. 40 metres in length is a massive section of woodland going from the embankment. So there are 2 of those areas going to be completely cleared of trees, and they are being cleared of trees to leave an area free of vegetation, or free of coarse vegetation, for that 1 in 10,000 chance flood to flow over evenly. Oh, just to go back to that, the last bullet point, actually, in the submitted plans, it is identified that for the grass strip, the 2 metre wide grass strip, and for the footpath and curb, that tree roots will be removed. Now, the submitted plans show that the water's edge trees are being retained, but their roots are going to be removed. Yeah, but the trees are actually shown on the plans as being retained. So, at the Strategic Planning Board meeting, we will have an opportunity to speak for, at the moment, we think around about 2.5 minutes. I'll go on to that in a little bit more detail. But the interesting thing about the officer's report, or what's normally referred to as the committee report, is that it really is quite condemning of the impact of the proposal upon trees, landscape and ecology. And it's referred to as the loss of those 2 metre, those 40 metre sections of woodland is referred to as being significantly harmful. They acknowledge the strength of local opposition, but they say the officer says in his report that safety effectively overrides any concerns in terms of the landscape and the ecology. So what they're saying effectively is safety is paramount. It was interesting, I was talking about this with a colleague at work today, and when you read the latest submission from Jacobs on the tree issues, because we and other people pulled up that if they take out so many trees, with decaying roots of those trees and wind exposure to the retained trees, then retained trees will be at an increased risk of failure, quite a significantly increased risk of failure. And when you start to look at that risk is probably worse as an unintended consequence than the risk from the reservoir, from the pool itself. This is it. You know, they're saying that it's outweighed by the need for the need for the proposal, and we think that we've demonstrated that there is no need for the current proposal, that there are options that don't require such significant impacts on trees, and in fact, we'll see a couple of those options in a few minutes. They do talk about, in the committee report, about the need for some conditions in terms of ecology, in terms of protection of trees during the development process, but that's farcical when the proposal is actually to remove tree roots of trees that are being retained. So we've got, there's 5 minutes for public speaking, and Stuart is going to be speaking on our behalf, but we only have 2.5 minutes because someone else has registered to speak as well. So I would put a plea out to you, if you know who that other person is, if you could ask them to make contact with us through the Friends of Poynton Pool email address, and perhaps we can come to some agreement in terms of how things move forward with regard to the verbal representations at the committee meeting. So the amended, it's not really an amended tree report, it's the amended justification that's come in from Jacobs on the tree issues now states that 78 trees are going to be removed, whereas they'd said that it was only 31 trees. They're also now acknowledging that 2 40-metre sections of the hedgerow, and of course there are other trees in there as well, are going to be removed. And then further 49 trees and 10 groups of trees will be impacted. That really underplays the extent of that impact to put it in numbers like that. An interesting comment from the case officer in his report is where he says that the creation of those 2 40-metre gaps in the roadside embankment woodland will be a brutal intervention and unequivocally harmful. You know, so the council, as a planning authority, is saying this is the worst outcome. You know, it couldn't be much worse than this. Our argument is there are much better outcomes, there are better alternatives. No, I'm not going to skip it. I didn't write this song. So just forgive me if I'm just boning up in your presence. Yeah. So lots of woodland has been commented on by the council's ecologist, the conservation officer. But really quite a weak response in terms of the overall impact on ecology, not only on the site, but adjacent to the site. If you think about it, if you were to look at Poynton Pool with an aerial view, then the woodland at Poynton Pool connects Prince's Incline with Norbury Brook. Prince's Incline connects into Norbury Brook and Lyme Park. So it's not just what you see on the ground at Poynton Pool. The visual impact from the main body of the park will be massive. Not only a visual impact, but the noise impact as well. Those of you who use Poynton Park regularly will know there's a significant difference in noise, an increase during the autumn and winter when the trees are out of leaf. So when the trees are gone completely, that will be a massive difference. And also it'll take away that sense of enclosure, which is that landscaped partner. Damage to the embankment. This is a really interesting point for me because I questioned with other people, why is it that even during the most severe storms, when water's flowing down Park Lane, when Poynton Brook is rising by over 1 metre, that there's no significant change in the water level at Poynton Pool. So I went along a few months ago with a corer, only taking out 1 centimetre diameter cores, and I took out 7 cores along the embankment at different positions across the embankment, and I found that every sample was sand and gravel, slightly cohesive, a little bit clayey, but it was saturated sand and gravel. Why is it saturated? Because water's flowing from the pool into the embankment. That is likely the way it was designed, to be what is known as a permeable weir. Google it, put it into a search engine, permeable weir. And what you'll see is it's a clay embankment or a clay-lined lake with a level edge to it. When the lake overflows, it overflows into a granular material, which is then disperses the water and it flows away. We found that the maximum increase since July in 2023, which is when we first started taking photographs, the maximum increase has been 70 millimetres or 7 centimetres, which is less than 3 inches increase. And interestingly, during the most severe rain event over that period, because we've actually correlated our photographs with the weather data, at the point of the biggest spike in rainfall, Poynton Pool actually dropped in level. Scheme cost, over £1.4 million. Impact in terms of loss of trees, we had a valuation, or the town council had a valuation of the trees carried out back in 2023, and that came out at just over 3 million, £3.1 million as a capital asset value was one valuation, and then another, using a different methodology, was over £5 million. So the loss of or impact upon that asset. The other thing, of course, in terms of the decision-making process that's gone into this is the risk assessment that's been carried out by Jacobs. And for anyone who's got the time to look at the detail of it, what you'll find is that they have increased the value of mitigating the risk at Poynton Pool 5 times in order to justify it. This is what they call a disproportion factor to weight the decision making in the direction of safety. And Poynton Town Council engaged with Professor David Ball. Some of you may have read his report on the council's website or on the Friends of Poynton Pool website. And David Ball tells us that the methodology that Jacobs have used is in the region of 20 years out of date. That these gross disproportion factors come from the 1940s, a law case in the 1940s, when employers placed very low value on human life. So to compensate for that, the courts would apply disproportion factors. But that's no longer the case. You know, that situation doesn't exist anymore. So all the way along, the risk has been inflated and the benefits of retaining the landscape have been devalued. The flood study that was initially carried out by Jacobs used computer modelling software, and the outcomes of that study were far less severe in terms of consequences of a dam break, were far less severe than the Environment Agency's data. So the Environment Agency have flood mapping data that is quite coarse. It isn't finely modelled to the specifics of an area. But Jacobs have chosen in their submission of the application to take their own flood modelling out, which showed that the consequence in terms of loss of life varied between, I think it was 0.14 and 0.09 of a life, in favour of using the Environment Agency's data that shows it at 1.04 of a life, which is a massive, massive increase. So they've taken that data out of their report before submitting that report with the planning application. Some areas that have that we've picked up on. Some of you might know that I went out in the summer with my son Jack. We jumped into the canoe with some ranging rods, and we measured the depth of the pool. We took 82 measurements across the pool, and we mapped them with using GPS, Global Positioning System. And I estimated that we had a mean depth of around 1.2 metres, and from that I calculated that the volume was probably around 80 metres. John has gone one stage further than that. He's mapped the levels and calculated the volume. And the volume is nearer to 60,000 cubic metres, which is less than half of the volume that has been used in the flood study that has determined that the risk is unacceptable. A couple of weeks ago, I and one or two friends lifted the manhole covers on either side of London Road, and we dropped a plumb line down and we measured various elements. The pipes under the road are 600 millimetres diameter, not 450. Again, the flood study uses 450 millimetres diameter pipes. The difference in that, in terms of cross-sectional area and therefore volume of flow, is that the 450 is about 56% of a 600mm diameter pipe. That's a massive difference. The dam embankment, they don't know the composition, they're not interested in the composition of the dam. What they've said in response to our concerns about the composition of the dam and the impact that the works might have on it, they've said they'll find out what the composition of the dam is when they take the trees out. Read the reports. It's in the reports. It's on the planning portal. You know, it is there. That's what they've said. So we don't dispute that the pool is a reservoir, but we do dispute the data that has been used to state the risk that has been presented. We also dispute the need to catastrophically alter the landscape of Poynton Park when there are less harmful alternatives available. So in our objection, we asked that Cheshire East Council defer the decision when it gets to committee. We hope that they've taken or will take account of that, so that further investigations can be carried out. And in terms of further investigations, from our visits to Poynton Pool with Stuart, conversations with Stuart, it is evident it's not difficult to measure the inflows at Poynton Pool. We know where the water flows in by setting up very simple flow measuring devices, you know, that men in sheds could create. We can measure the inflow, and at the same time we can measure the outflow, and we can identify whether all of the water that comes into the pool is flowing out through the spillway. You know, it would take very little effort to do that. Yeah, I think I'll hand over to Stuart here, because actually I think you've worked on top of them, Stuart.
No, I've not worked on top of it.
You've not?
No. Right. That's not one of mine.
Forgive me.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. All right, great. Okay, so I think just a quick introduction of why I'm here. So I'm a civil engineer, worked in the water industry for 35 years. I don't live in Poynton. I heard about this problem on the BBC News feed, my personalised news channel, some of you may have on the app. And I went to your Facebook page and see if they help. So I'm not being paid, don't want to get paid. Just want to see the right thing done. My background is water. I worked with your resident, John Borthwick, many years ago, and we worked for a company that built things that we designed. And when you do that, very quickly the people building it tell you if what you've designed is rubbish, expensive, difficult to build, etc. So those are the kind of skills. So water is what the medium I work in, but the skills are, you know, how do you do things so that they're easy to build, safe to build, hopefully economic to build. So that's why I came on, without any knowledge of the scheme. Is kind of look at it, is what they're doing appropriate, over the top, is there a better way of doing it? So that's when I rocked up the site. This slide here, I think John, who's been doing a lot of work and badgering the Environment Agency and various organisations in the background, is like a terrier. No, genuinely, it does great work. And knocked up this slide, he's been doing some drawings in CAD with us. And he was just trying to show us this, you know, so yes, Poynton Pool is a statutory reservoir. It falls under the Reservoir Act. It has to be inspected, maintained and operated in accordance with the provisions of the Act. But clearly it's not the biggest reservoir in the country. There are lots of small reservoirs like Poynton Pool dotted around. But as you can see, it's relatively shallow, relatively small in volume terms. And what does that mean? What does that mean in terms of this project? What it means is that there's less energy in the water. So it's about the consequence. So we talk about the dam failing, it breaching, releasing all the water. So if you release 2 metre depth of water, you've got 20, I won't get full into engineering terms, but you've got a lot more water pressure than in a 20 metre dam. You've got 10 times the water pressure. So that energy is released in the breach. It's a sudden release of that energy causes the floods that you see when we have major flooding events. So clearly, not only less water, it's got less energy because of the impounded height. So when I walked around site with John, Mike, I think that was the first visit, was you two? I sort of was asking, well, where's the water coming? Show me the pipes, let's have a look at it. Is there any monitoring? There was no monitoring. And that's one of the things you look at with anything you're doing. You want to try and validate your assumptions with some what's actually going on. Gwenda and others, I think, have been walking around the lake, taking photographs and looking at the rain monitoring. What you can see is what Mike touched on earlier is that the pool doesn't seem to respond to rainfall particularly. There's not a strong response. So if you look at the curve, I wish I could be glasses rather than the contact lenses for vanity. So the green line is the rainfall, so which shows the rainfall spikes. The blue dots are the levels in the pool. So very small response. There is some response, although in one area it shows it's dropping. And then if you look at Poynton Brook, the watercourse in the area, you see a much stronger response. You can see the light blue line and the spikes, which are running sort of in parallel, and a bit of a lag. So it rains and then you see runoff. Depends how the response depends on how steep the ground is, how dry or how soaked. So actually, some of the biggest responses you get when you get those summer storms, when the ground's very hard and it just doesn't soak in, it just runs straight off because the ground's like concrete. And then it gets softened and it starts to get absorbed, and when the ground's saturated, it will all end up going quickly into the catchment. So you've got those two sort of aspects. So a lot of anecdotal evidence. None of you have seen the reservoir flood. No one's yet, and so a short window of monitoring reservoir levels and rainfall monitoring starts to correlate with that, so you're looking to try and build a picture. So there's sort of two aspects to this. There's what is the risk, how much water do we need to deal with, and how do you deal with it, so that you've got the bathtub that Mike showed you, which is a great analogy. I'm going to steal that and use that. It's a fantastic one. So that's what we're looking at. So how much water do we deal with it, and how do we deal with it? So the unknown at the moment is how much water. But we've got low confidence in the flood study, and I think that's putting it politely to say we've got low confidence. But regardless of that, is there another way of doing it? As I said, that's my background, is trying to solve problems with easier solutions. And in simple terms, you've probably all watched Jaws at some time, We don't need a bigger boat, we need a bigger pipe, in simple terms. Yeah, that's that aspect. So regardless of whether we can reduce the outflow that needs to be routed through the reservoir, through the overflow, can we actually deal with it anyway? So I looked at that to see, when I first walked around site, I could see where the structure is, the existing overflow, the brick box we see with the grating in front of it. It's a nice clear strip on the embankment where there's no trees or just that one big stump that got left there. And that's where the pipe goes, and you can see the lie of the land where the water would naturally go. So to me, it was barn door, that's where you would put your enlarged spillway. So we've gone for a conventional option. I've self-designed probably a dozen or so of new spillways. Concrete, like the existing, and just follow the line of the existing overflow. One of the things that we've looked at, and this is the kind of things is that the proposal that's gone to planning has got a long strip of the embankment that's cleared. So there's 2 80-metre strips. So effectively that's the weir, the overflow, the emergency overflow weir, a broad-crested weir, for those of you who want to get more into the detail. So in terms of what we've looked at here is, in order to get a long weir, we've gone for what's called a finger weir, a double-sided weir. So we're looking for the length, because the rate in which the water in the reservoir rises is a function to the length of your weir. So you've got a short weir, you've got to have more height of water to get over the weir. Okay? Sorry. We've come with 2 options, one we call 1C and the other one we call 2C. We don't have a 1A or a 1B, do we, John? We might have had earlier.
The letters were just revisions of the...
That's fine. No, just so people are wondering what can we see 1A and 1B. 1C is picking up on the fact this is an emergency overflow, and I thought it was quite unusual that the proposed scheme allows the reservoir to overflow onto the highway, which is how it works. So normal flows down the existing structure, extreme events going over the crest. So in simple terms, well, if that's what we're matching, then we can come up with a solution that does the same. So either that utilises the pipe that goes under the road for the normal flows, but then allow discharge to London Road and then down the other side of the road in the extreme flood events. But equally, I want to look at another option, which is what can we do that's a bit better than that? Can we enhance the proposal? Can we do something better? And we've done some outline calculations to put some sizes and scale on these solutions. So there's more work to be done, but they are reasonable outline designs for a new. Apologies if you don't like drawings. I know my wife says stop drawing things on the kitchen table. So this is the line of the pool. So that's the line.
That's the edge of the road.
Yeah, sorry, the pool's here, isn't it, John? So yeah. Okay. You've got London Road, and so you've got the embankment.
Just get the microphone.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so what we're proposing to do is to build a new concrete channel through that cleared strip of the embankment with a 2-sided weir. You can see the arrows. And perhaps those who are interested can look at the drawings later on if you want to hang back. And then through a screen that stops water bottles, footballs, any flotsam and jetsam, and then in the existing pipe, under the road and out 100 metres or so. But in the extreme floods, this structure will overtop. We've got these training walls onto London Road and then over the other side of the highway. In section, so here we are at the pool. Okay, yes, so we've got the existing outfall structure here. The green line is the concrete structure, so a fairly shallow concrete channel that then shoots down into the existing pipe under London Road. That's the screen that stops any plastic bottles, footballs, small children, books. Little footbridge, so you can get across there, so we're not blocking access. 3 metres wide, which is the same width as the existing structure. The weir is 9 metres long, so we get 2 sides of the weir, that gives us 18, and the front and back we get about 21 metre long weir. We don't know if the embankment has a clay core, but we've shown a key which bites into the clay core, so make sure that we can't have water tracking under the structure and creating a seepage path which can erode the dam. That's about, and here at this end you can see a bit of a concentration of water over tops. It will hit a sort of a scour path so it won't wash away the footpath. There's a bit of work to be done then, we might end up having a little letterbox to sort of as a pressure relief. So that's really getting into the detail. Worth adding that John's done a survey, been out with the level survey. So it's not just based on, this is based on some data that we've been able to apply. Option 2C. Option 2C is the same in most respects. So pools here, 3 metre wide concrete structure, double-sided weir, trash screen. But what we've done here is on the line of the 600 pipe, we've got 2 new pipes, roughly sized, a couple of 1200 pipes. They would need to be either partial or full closure of the road, but we have got the bypass now, which is a bit of an added benefit from where you might have been 5 years ago. And they will take the full extreme flood event, notwithstanding the fact we don't agree with the size of the flood. They will take the full, and then we will allow it just to well up, discharge to the one on the other side of the road. But again, we've got the 600 pipe, so normal flows continue doing what they've always done. In section again looks the same in section, other than we've got a bigger pipe coming out the end. 2 pipes at the side. Might be a bit of a squeeze getting 2 1200s into a 3 metre, so it might need to be 3.5. But that's when we get into the fine detail. The broad principles are there. I say it's very conventional. It's most reservoirs have this kind of structure. You go. Sometimes that's for a photograph. To try and show, because I know, this is my bread and butter, but for you it's sort of a different language. But if you walk up at Teg's Nose, that's a fairly small spillway structure you can see if you walk up from the road from the pub side. It's stone clad, but you get the idea. So a small channel of water runs through. Most of them are much bigger than this. In my experience, the proposal to strip the crest of an existing embankment of trees to create a sort of an overflow weir is extremely unusual. Yes, there are new dams that are built to overflow in that way, but to retrospectively do that to an existing reservoir, in my experience, I've not seen it. So, when you see, what happens, what we all do when we see something we've not seen before, we question it, don't we? That's all I do. I ask why. So, benefits of the alternative options. So, first of all, it's pretty obvious we don't chop down any trees. Well, other than a dead tree, which is probably a perch for some hawk or buzzard or something. So that all the log burners around you will be after the spoils from that. Because we're not taking any mature trees, there is an issue when you chop down trees on an existing embankment, is the roots are going to die. Trees have got massive networks of roots. What do the roots do? They take water out of the ground. So that's what the tree's looking for. So you're going to change the moisture content of the embankment, and over time these roots are going to decay. And there's a potential, depending on the ground conditions, that those could create what we call voids, seepage pathways, and then you could end up having more work to be done on the embankment. So spend 1.4 million, if we forget about the value to society of the trees that might articulate it really well. I've never heard those figures, I'm staggered. But then potentially there's another liability for Cheshire East Council, which I'm sure they may not appreciate, I don't know, but we're making sure they realise that. So we talk about the emergency drawdown. So if there's a problem with the reservoir, you need to be able to get water out quickly. So if you so happened at Todbrook, every fire tender in Derbyshire was pumping out Todbrook when there was that emergency there. If there was an emergency drawdown at Poynton Pool, with the current proposals, there would be emergency standby pumps. They have to be hired in, put somewhere, and pipes. And that has to be done potentially when there's a severe event and resources are strained. So we'll just go back. What we would do, maybe in a section, I'm not sure. we would just have, in the end of the weir, we would have a small sluice or a hand stop that could be open, pulled, which enable rapid drawdown. I think the requirement is 300 mil on this reservoir based on its size. So that's done, that's fairly easy, so that's a plus. We can have emergency drawdown without calling out the fire brigade or hiring a load of diesel pumps or whatever. It's not got much maintenance, it's a concrete structure, so designed properly, concrete will last for 100 years or more. And certainly the vogue is that whilst concrete structures on reservoirs are supervised and designed and built properly, so there should be no maintenance issues. But with a embankment, which is a vegetated embankment, there's going to be continual maintenance to keep that annually sapling starting up, so making sure that it's level. And as I said before, the our alternative is a conventional overflow structure. Interestingly, we had an email from a civil engineering Cornwall or somewhere down there saying, Cardiff said exactly the same thing, so that was reassuring. Other benefits of our proposals: dead easy to build. If you've got a partial road closure, you can get your excavating plant on London Road. You can easily excavate the material, easily load it into wagons, easily bring concrete and other materials in. Don't need any massive cranes. You don't need to track the crest. We've got a Environment Agency compliant trash screen that can be cleared from the highway. So anything that gets in the reservoir that would block the outflow can be pulled out. The mobile would have to open that grating and get behind the weir with the waders on. Obviously, we don't damage the embankment, and I'm not from Poynton. I cycled past the reservoir. I didn't know it was there, but the trees are great. They're gone forever. Never mind about the sycamore gap. So we wouldn't need the 480 metre curb, yes, but we would need some kind of regulating crest that is level, uniform, and can be monitored. So it might be something more like a concrete gravel edge or something. I would propose. We don't need carbon offset mitigation because we retain our carbon sink, and we all did a landscape management plan. Right, questions? Do you mind?
Cheers. Thank you. Yeah, great. So thanks, Stuart. That's a sort of a general outline of the history of this process, and then what we think is a reasonable approach to finding a solution, if a solution is indeed required. And again, we're not entirely convinced that is the case. So, open up for questions.